Mark Howard was a regular guy, an award-winning author, and a political science professor who began visiting his childhood friend Marty, who was in prison. It turns out that the visits reshaped the course of Mark's life. He dedicated himself to helping overturn Marty's wrongful conviction. Then he went to law school. After Marty was exonerated and released, Mark founded the Frederick Douglass Project for Justice, best known for its prison visitation program that promotes the humanity of incarcerated people. The project facilitates structured meetings at prisons with members of free society and incarcerated individuals. They engage in open conversations so they can learn from each other. It's a pretty cool initiative. So, you know, prisons, the way my mind works. When I heard about it, I reached out to George and Mimi, because I think there are prison experts. That might not be a fair assessment, but just to see if they were familiar with this project and the process. In the process, I learned that back in 2009, Mimi co-taught St. Joe's University's first Inside Out program, where a cohort of university students and incarcerated persons participated in a transformational semester-long course in a Philadelphia prison. And it turns out that Lori Pompa of Temple University, another Philadelphia-based university, founded and still leads the Inside Out program. But I digress, which I have a tendency to do. Point is, great work is being done at the grassroots. But back to Mark for a moment. I don't know Mark. I never heard of him or the Frederick Douglass Project for Justice until this past week. I saw something online that tweaked my interest. Yet that phrase, that's part of their mission, promoting the humanity of incarcerated people, caught me off guard. Even though I have visited friends in prison, I haven't spent much time focused on the humanity of incarcerated people. And what strikes me is that stereotyping and generalizing about anyone as other negates their uniqueness and humanity. And that, my friends, brings us back to today's gospel. Anybody else find Jesus's behavior in today's gospel dismissive or belligerent or insensitive? Being approached by a Canaanite woman should have come as no surprise. Jesus and his disciples had traveled. They were in Tyre and Sidon. These were seaports on the Mediterranean, populated by wealthy Canaanite traders and merchants. It's in the area that we today know as Lebanon. Jesus and his disciples were the outsiders there. The nameless, desperate Canaanite woman begs him to have compassion and heal her daughter. Jesus's response was typical of someone who was annoyed to have been interrupted. I know we probably can't relate to that, but it's kind of surprising because we don't expect Jesus to respond that way. Yet she desperately pleaded with Jesus, and his response is an insult. It isn't right to take the food of the children and throw it to the dogs. Make no mistake, being referred to as a dog was no more a compliment in Jesus's day than it would be these days. Yet, rather than taking offense Her comeback to this derogatory statement is even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the children's table. And at this point, Jesus says, "Great is your faith. It is done as you wish." And her daughter was healed. You've got to admit, it took Jesus a little while to get there. So what might we learn from this interaction? Maybe that it illustrates Jesus's humanity. When tired, even he lashes out in an incredibly human way. Despite his problematic behavior, Jesus ultimately demonstrates he's open to questioning his own biases and changing his position. He allows himself to defy cultural expectations by choosing to engage in conversation with a woman, and ultimately ends up healing her daughter. Perhaps the hero of the story is the unnamed Canaanite woman who stood her ground graciously until she had been both seen and heard. Think about it. She wasn't Jewish, and she probably spoke with an accent, which seems to have been justification to be categorized as other by Jesus and his disciples. When snubbed, rather than giving up, she persists, asks for help, keeps the conversation alive, going so far as using his own language against him to show his narrow-mindedness, unwavering in her belief that her daughter would be made whole. I love that the bold, creative, and resourceful person who teaches Jesus to see the world through a much larger lens is a woman. When Jesus refers to Jewish people as God's children and non-Jews as less than dogs, she calls him out for the hurtfulness of her rhetoric. She also uses his language to show how restrictive his thinking is. She demonstrates both quick wit and courage in being unafraid to wrestle, to stay with the struggle. Jesus changes his perspective. My friends, we all have our unconscious biases and people and issues we don't think about. The recent survey sent out by the social justice team here of George and Terry, Joe and Tina, invites each of us to provide input on areas of concern for us. I encourage you to consider completing the survey. And I want to conclude my comments today with the words of Amy Jill Levine, Professor Emerita of Jewish Studies and New Testament Studies at Vanderbilt University, to really summarize today's message. This gospel, says Amy Jill Levine, assures caregivers that their efforts and exhaustion are seen. It reminds insiders that outsiders can be role models. It instructs petitioners to persevere nonviolently, hold their ground, and have faith in their abilities and the justice of their cause. It instructs leaders to attend to all in need. Pretty much sums up the message. Thank you.